Welcome to the NanoCap podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of NanoCap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of NanoCap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. On today's episode, we have Chris Ehrlich, CEO of CERo Therapeutics, stock ticker CERO. CERo Therapeutics is an immune therapy company focusing on advancing development of engineered T-cell therapeutics for the treatment of cancer. Chris, thanks for being on the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Will.
So, Chris, as I was kind of looking through your resume, your bio, as I was doing my research, it seems like there's almost no one out there who could have possibly as much experience as you do on the bio side, from the mergers and acquisition side to the SPAC side, and knowing every single kind of level of that. And so I would love to just kind of start a few years back when you were working at Interwest Partners. And I saw that there's a lot of kind of heavy tech B2B type investments over there. But then also there's some companies like The RealReal and Canva. And so I would just love to kind of hear a little bit about, first off, your background, then getting into Interwest Partners, and then how you kind of parlayed your background in kind of venture capital and trying to pick winners into a more kind of, I don't want to say stable, but a career of more going after companies that have kind of already made it and helping them get to the finish line.
Okay, great. So I'm a non-scientist by background. My father was a physician. He took care of young children, and he was an orthopedic surgeon. And so he helped them to walk. And it was very inspiring to me to see what pediatric doctors could do and with medicine. But he had told me at a young age, don't go into medicine. Bad idea. So I was a generalist. I was an undergrad in government at Dartmouth. Anything but medicine. I wound up going into strategy consulting on a firm called Ehrlich, which at the time was pretty obscure. It was now very, very large and popular, particularly in the biotech space, as a generalist, complete generalist in business. And interesting, this is about 1991, 92. This is when biotech, the second wave, second generation of biotech started in the Boston area. So I wound up working for some companies that were venture-backed at the time, doing business work, talking to physicians to ask them about potential prescribing habits for new biotech drugs and development. Super random. Turned out a lot of these doctors were friends of my dad's. I was very comfortable talking to the doctors, so I realized there was a potential business opportunity here. Anyway, I did that for a couple of years. I decided I didn't want to be in the advice business. I'd rather be in the building business. So through a couple of changes on the East Coast, went to the pharma business, got an MBA at Northwestern. And what I really wanted to do after about 10 years of work was be in the venture capital space, helping these emerging companies grow. So I came out in 2000, about 25 years ago, roughly today, to San Francisco, where I am now, to work at Interwest. And Interwest was a very large, diversified, as you point out, venture firm. So they did tech and life sciences being kind of medical devices and biotech. I was there to do the life sciences. So it was not me who invested in things like The RealReal and Canva. But my partners, I focused exclusively on kind of the biopharma and life sciences side. What I realized was, to your point about helping these companies grow, making the investments easy. It's what you do with the investment by sitting around in the companies and helping them figure out their strategy, figure out how to raise money, figure out how to partner, figure out how to create value for their shareholders. That I spent 13 of my years there doing. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but that was kind of the shtick, I think.
No, that was extremely helpful. And then a question I have as a total outsider to this, I've talked to a few different biotech type companies, and it seems like with biotech, you basically need it from idea to being able to actually maybe like sell some sort of product to a customer. It could easily be like 10 to 15 years, which makes total sense with a like venture type investing style where you're willing to take 10 to 15 years to get some sort of return. But there's so many biotech companies that are going public through SPACs or through other ways. Why do so many biotech companies tend to go public while they're still going through the trial phase, opposed to just kind of staying in private markets and not having to deal with the pressures day to day of earnings and that? Why do you feel that is the way it is?
It's a very good question. So the reality is I was doing a little bit of historical math, and I've been around long enough to realize that there are drugs that I worked on 20 years ago, 22 decades, that are now kind of coming to fruition. So 5 to 10 kind of sounds short. It takes, serious time frame. That being said, very few biotech companies, we call them pharma companies unencumbered by revenue. We're not like tech companies. We don't actually strive to get these things necessarily approved and sell them in the market. In fact, that's usually the bailiwick of the bigger biotechs or the pharma companies. And so we joke that biotechs are pharma companies unencumbered by revenues, right? So that answers a little bit of your question in that our job as company builders or biotech investors is to find interesting technologies that we want to move forward in the clinic to de-risk them, to show that they actually might work. And 9 out of 10 times, maybe 9.5 out of 10 times, if you get to that point, these wind up getting snatched up or partnered by larger organizations that are better at commercializing. And so the question really is, it's hard to truncate the 10 to 20 years it takes to get a lot of these drugs to market. It just is. But what happens for the companies going public is biotechs go public for 2 reasons. 1, because they can, and 2, because they need to, right? The can is very rare, very rare. So in 2020, 2021, we had a neat bubble over the course. Every 5 or 6 years is a bubble for some exogenous factors like COVID and vaccines, and everybody gets out and wants to get public and raise capital. Biotech companies, by their nature, are voracious consumers of capital. So you go public because you can get a bunch of money and hopefully figure out how you can move some asset in your pipeline forward. More often than not, biotech companies, to your point, go public, particularly via non-traditional routes like SPACs or reverse mergers, because they need access to capital. And when the public markets are dry, as they have been for a long time now, then the private markets are often dry. So you're stuck. So you look any way you can to get public, and it is difficult. It's incredibly difficult. But one of the pros of being public is you can almost always access capital through different sources that are not just traditional private. And I know this because I spent so many years on the venture side, as you point out, with the private companies. And it was extremely difficult, even when you're in a great venture firm and a great company with great investors, to find somebody else to put more money into those things. On the public side, the universe is orders of magnitude bigger.
That's okay. That totally makes sense. And then, since just before we get into CERo Therapeutics, since you're kind of the expert of dealing with these different deals, and as you mentioned, a lot of these different biotech companies either just basically get figure out a licensing deal or get acquired someday by one of the bigger companies who actually do the implementation. And so going back to like valuations and stuff like that, is it based off of mostly just what the total addressable market is and then kind of work back from there? Is there some sort of cost plus in there where you say, hey, we want to get at least 30% higher than what we spent over the last 2 decades trying to get this done, and so you got to give us a premium on all the time spent? Or how do those valuations totally go down?
So I remember it was probably the 1980s when George Bush was running for president, and he coined the concept of voodoo economics, right? Biotech pricing and valuations are based on voodoo economics. It's a black box. So there are 2 ways you can value a potential therapeutic, which is where I spend most of my time, which are drugs. One is, what are the comparable companies that are in the space worth, right? Because, if you're interested in financial metrics, you probably look and value companies on revenue streams or what you'll call price to earnings. We do biotech, we value them, we call price to dreams, right? Because the reality is you don't exactly know how big something can be. The cool part about drugs is it's one of the last natural monopolies in America where you have 17 years of exclusivity to essentially, price discriminate if you get something to market. And that's why you can make billions and billions and billions of dollars protected for a long period of time if you get to the promised land. Very few drugs do. So the other way you value it, one is comp. So market's robust. My company looks like your company. I want to value like this, maybe. more often than not, it's really kind of a DCF, discounted cash flow. And you basically look and say, what's my market? How am I going to penetrate it if I get there? Okay, looks really big. Now, what are my probabilities of actually getting there? At the beginning, it's really small. As you progress through and you make preclinical data look better, you get through the FDA, you get into human beings, you show safety, you show efficacy in a couple of patients, essentially your discount rate goes down, the value of your discounted cash flow stream goes up on a net present value basis, and theoretically, your valuation goes higher. And that actually works a lot, except when you're in really bad markets, in which case they go, wow, I'm not listening. And no one kind of gives you a good opportunity to pop there. So it's really difficult. But those are the two ways you basically value these.
And then last kind of follow up in general, say there is a therapeutic company similar to yours out there that gets acquired for some crazy valuation to whatever Merck or Pfizer. Is that scary on one end because now they're going to be able to scale it while you're still trying to get the trials done? Or is it exciting because now you know there's a market and one of the other big players might scoop you up for something similar because they don't want to get left behind, similar to like the GLP-1s and everyone trying to kind of pile in?
That's a really good question. By and large, the difference between biotech and tech, and I know because I was in one of those firms, as you point out, is that to develop a biotech product, you need a certain piece of intellectual property, which does not necessarily allow you to exploit that technology, but what it does is it allows you to prevent other people from doing what you're doing. So no one actually develops anything unless you know that in the end, I can have sort of an exclusive on my little market, right? So 9 out of 10 times, if a large company or a large biotech buys a different one, it's really positive. I can't remember the last time you said, there are very few logical buyers and they got bought and that's bad for me. I mean, probably 10, 50% of the time that happens. But by and large, because what I'm doing, what every company is doing in this space is unique and different and has some intellectual property to protect it, if someone else buys one, it's a great halo effect. So for example, in my space, I'm in the cancer immunotherapy space. 10, 15 years ago, there were two companies called Juno and Kite that got bought each for close to $10 billion. And that spawned a ton of people wanting to go into this space, which was, hey, maybe I could get bought for close to that amount of money, back to the kind of the comparable analysis. So it doesn't usually intimidate us if one of the companies gets bought. Usually it's a very positive thing.
So you've had a long career in biotech. You've seen a lot of companies. You've seen them from like exactly how the sausage is made as you go through these different valuations and figure it out and have a career of pattern matching. So fast forward to kind of current day, what about the opportunity of CERo Therapeutics got you excited where you're like, okay, this one I actually want to spend some time on. This is one I actually want to run. This is something that's worth spending my time on, since you probably get pitched or hear about a different biotech company like once a week. What made this one the winner?
So I actually have a good answer to that. It's couple-fold. So one is, for better or worse, cancer is kind of 60% of biotech. So I've spent almost all my career in the cancer space. Two is, my father actually died of blood cancer. So I have this extra motivation and ambition to try and create drugs that theoretically, if not could have saved him, could have saved people like him. Third is, in this case, so there's kind of an existential desire to do it. The third one, the most interesting, is when you look at the heuristics, to your point about pattern matching, about what should, even in bad markets, be valuable and important. And so one of the things about CERo I've lived with now for almost 3 years is that every single aspect of the company is really incredibly strong. It's, in fact, if not as strong as everything I've seen, it's among the top 5%. The intellectual property is great. The people around it are great. The science is great. The unmet need is great. The differentiation is great. And what's really cool now is, we talk about from kind of benchtop to bedside. We talk about taking a science project, which CERo is, and making it real. And so in the next couple of months, we're going to dose our first patient with real cancer, which is incredible, right? Because you're taking a piece of technology that came out of essentially academics and you're putting it into people with a real disease that, are going to die if they don't get it. And so that's just massively motivating to me to do something important, kind of the do well by doing good. But to take something that's really differentiated for people who are 100% mortality going to die and theoretically potentially have an impact really quickly, I struggle to find something kind of more value added than that.
So we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but in your own words, what is CERo Therapeutics? What do you all do? What's kind of the breakthrough?
So cancer and treatments have emerged. So since the 1970s, 60s, 70s, President Nixon declared war on cancer, and very little came out of it, right? Because what they did until about mid 90s was treat people with essentially chemotherapy, which you've heard about, which is basically toxic poison you put in your body, and it kills everything fast growing: your hair, your gut, your cancer, your skin. Really bad. Over the years, they started making progress. In the 90s, they came out with the first monoclonal antibodies, which were sort of more targeted therapies towards treating cancer. So better for patients, better safety. Maybe you could live longer. That was a really cool wave. The wave that came after that, which we're in now, is called the cell and gene therapy wave. And what that does now is just like when you have a cold, if you're a generally healthy person, you don't die of the cold because your immune system figures it out and solves the problem. There's a system now which is called kind of autologous cell therapy. And what they actually do to someone who has cancer is they suck their blood out. They take some of the white blood cells. They modify the white blood cells to go recognize the cancer, which is in your system your body doesn't recognize. They put the cells back in. So it's your own cells that are modified. Your body doesn't get upset when it sees it because it's used to it. It's not a foreign body. And you've basically reprogrammed your immune system to go selectively target the cancer, both efficacious-wise and safety-wise, if it works out well. So that's the wave that we're in now, and that's what CERo is doing. And there are companies that have gone before it, so it's not that far-fetched. One of the things that's nice is, I just described the difficult process to use to go to the medicine cabinet, pull out a drug, take a pill, and take it. This is very different, right? But it's not that bizarre to physicians or to payers or anybody, in the sense that people have now been doing it for about a decade. And so what's happening to us is we're a much better version of what they're used to in this next wave. We are kind of not exactly where the puck is going, but the puck is there. And that's why I can take this crazy experimental treatment and go treat actual patients in the next couple of months.
And so do you have to partner with a specific lab or like machine company to be able to like combine the white blood cells with the right antibodies and stuff like that? And then kind of, as we mentioned earlier, how do you scale? Do you just hire more labs or do you show that these trials work after a dozen or so people in a few years and then just have someone else who can scale, obviously acquire you and go from there?
So the answer is yes. Right? Okay. So you can't predict, you can prepare. So we sit around, a board table and say, we're at total pilot scale right now, which we can do really capital efficiently. We don't have to make investments in manufacturing of our own. Most of the people that work with us are consultants, because biotech is incredibly risky. And one of the mistakes people make, big one, is they raise a ton of money, they hire a ton of people before the technology is ready. They get into the clinic, things don't work, and they have to lay all the people off and have these huge liabilities. We don't. We're incredibly capital efficient. And so we work on a pilot scale, and we go patient by patient. And in fact, our restriction in this year will be how much can we manufacture, assuming things go well. So we'll dose a patient, see how the patient does. Patient does well, dose another, manufacture, which takes a month. Dose another patient, patient does well, manufacture. So we're limited. Our manufacturing capacity is perfect for what we're trying to do this year. Now, let's say it takes off, and you'll know, to your point, pretty quickly. I get 3, 4, 5 patients worth of data. It's curative. It's a treatment. It's safe. I'm not sure what the outcome will be, but whatever the results, let's say they're great. And it's frankly unethical not to give patients who are going to die. We have a problem because we do have manufacturing capacity issues. So we're starting to look now into should we be lucky enough to have that demand? How do we make more? To your point, we absolutely have to partner. The cool part is, because at least our lead indication, which you're going to ask me a bit about, is so small and so concentrated that our timeline and our dollars to get to approval, if we really wanted to do it on our own, even despite what I said beforehand, is so short and so crisp that we could own this product and as a small company get this product to treat AML theoretically to approval and maybe even sell it ourselves. We're not
Okay.
planning on doing it, but we could. That's what's so cool, because you have a lot of companies. If I'm doing, to your point, GLP-1, the studies are so big and thousands of people, or diabetes or heart disease. No small company can afford to do it, nor should they. But this is small and tight and very capital efficient. So theoretically, this is much better in the hands of someone with a giant manufacturing group, reimbursement group, marketing group. But as a small company, we can make a lot of progress.
And so as you're doing your trials, what is considered success? I know that I talked to some people with therapeutics and they're saying, hey, we want to have an extra 9 to 24 months of quality life. And then there's other people who say we want 100% remission. What would you say, hey, we consider this totally a success after this first trial?
So the patients that we're treating initially with acute myeloid leukemia have an incredibly low success rate in terms of current therapies. Most of them will probably expire in a very short time frame. So extending their life is important. How much do we have to extend it? How long? There's a difference between what's approvable and what's considered clinically meaningful. I think the heuristic we use is that if you can get somebody to what they'll call a CR, a complete response, the durability of that should be 6 months. So if I can extend your life by 6 months without needing something else, that's meaningful. I think less than that's probably okay and probably approvable, but to your point, less of a commercial success. Now, this is aspirational to be sure, but if you look at our data and what we're trying to do and what a lot of cancer companies try and do, frankly, we're trying to make this curative, right? Just like AIDS, essentially. Few people die from AIDS these days because they actually knock down enough of the virus load. They die with it rather than from it. That's our goal here. I think that's a silly goal in the short term because no one's ever done it. But that would be incredible, like forever. But let's just assume meaningful is a couple of months afterwards. Because the patients we're going into are all salvage at this point. They don't have any other options.
And then say it does help for those, say, like 6 months. Is there can you see through your research, is there another therapeutic they should be combining on top of it that helps with something else? Or is it they just take yours all alone and then this is kind of their last stop on their journey? Or how does it work with, would someone go through chemo while they're doing your therapeutics, or would that not make any sense?
So it's a very interesting question. So initially, we're going into patients with no other concomitant therapy because they're out of options. So in one subset of the patients with AML, which we're going after, for example, they have a genetic mutation that makes, if you get chemotherapy, it makes the cancer worse. So it's contraindicated. They don't have a choice, right? So great. The other interesting thing to your point is what we found is that in certain kinds of cancers, there are certain kinds of small molecule or kind of other chemotherapy type drugs, targeted drugs, that actually help ours and that they upregulate the target that we're going after. And that's really neat. So that could actually help. Just from a practical perspective, though, Will, one of the problems in developing cancer drugs is, to your point, because there's so many different things in development, it's like a Rubik's Cube. It's odd because you pick one, but then what if it does this? And then if another one gets approved, what's your standard of care with that? And so ideally, what people want to see is what they call single agent activity. They want to see your drug makes a difference. And then 100% probability that as other things come up, they'll do things in combination. Everybody will get dosed with multiple drugs. It's just the way it works because nothing's truly curative.
So yeah, it can be hard trying to figure out what the actual what the standard you should be experimenting off of, since they have this cocktail of other stuff plus they're already sick. So yeah, no, I can
100%.
imagine where you go, well, did it cause nausea? It's like, who knows, right? It could be a variety of different things going on that could have caused that.
100%, and maybe just many drugs at once to interact with each other that make you sick, right?
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. So as I talk to these biotech companies, it tends that they're usually, like you all, are focusing on kind of one goal and we're sprinting towards the finish line, but they always have one or two patents in the background that they're kind of ooh, and we could do this for dogs too, or something like that. Do you all have any other things or any other pokers in the fire that you kind of might be looking at, or is it all based on this is the one thing we want to make sure we get done. And then from there, we can worry about scaling, and we don't really want to lose focus.
So we have what we'll call sort of a platform and a product, right? Because our lead asset theoretically definitely has data in, let's call it liquid tumors as well as solid tumors, which are two different kind of indications. Very few immunotherapies have shown they work in solid tumors. So that's kind of a holy grail. So we're going to go into liquid tumors now because we think that's where traditional these types of immunotherapies have shown great efficacy and the bar is not as high. We're also petitioning the FDA to go into solid tumors as well. And so, interesting to your point, am I a single shot? No. Am I a multiple shot on goal? Yes. But I got to finance that, back to our initial discussion. So it's one of the questions we wrestle with all the time. And I get people calling me saying, just focus on AML, own that, it's small, it can be yours. Other ones say, you're crazy not to look at solid tumors, that's worth a ton. And what if I actually get an interesting signal in AML and some interesting signs of efficacy in solid tumors? Then what, right? So the reality is I could consume $50, $100, $150 million if I had really interesting data in both. I don't need anything behind it because now I got a pipeline, and I might go to the FDA and say, I want a treatment for AML, I want a treatment for B-cell malignancies, I want a treatment for non-small cell lung cancer and for ovarian. That's like a whole company.
100%. So you kind of just said it right there, because like as we're kind of wrapping up here, one of my last questions usually is like, where do you see the company in the next like 5 to 10 years? But you kind of described the roadmap right there. Is there anything else you'd want to add?
No, I think that this is just a ridiculously exciting point for us in CERo, as I said, because we're really on the cusp of moving something from a beautiful piece of science into a potential clinical reality. And we're really excited about, sharing with the market these data over the course of the year. We're at some top sites, and I can't, express my gratitude enough, or my enthusiasm for the people that are working on this at all the sites. And remember, at the end of the day, these are about treating real patients with real names, with families. And so, gosh, I hope it really works. I'm really optimistic it will, and provide some impact on their lives. But as a potential investor, shareholder, company builder, I can't imagine a higher calling than kind of doing this. So really appreciate your interest in this, and happy to follow up more if you want in the future. But thanks for your attention.
Yeah, no, thank you for everything you do and helping people. And if people want to hear more about what you're working on at CERo Therapeutics, where should I send them?
You can send them to the website. I think that's probably the best place. We have a very robust PR and IR campaign. We're putting out releases every week so we can show everybody in the world our progress towards the clinic. And we expect to present data on the patients as we generate the patients. So you don't have to wait. So this is going to be real time, and we'd love people to come along for the journey.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Chris. And for those still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
Thanks, Will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast express disclaims all liability for any individual's